Alright, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you is gonna flip everything you thought you knew about Emma Watson. You know her as Hermione Granger, right? The brightest witch of her age, the girl who could do no wrong. But here's the kicker. Behind that perfect smile and those carefully crafted Instagram posts about feminism and equality, there's a story so messy, so controversial, that it almost destroyed her career multiple times. We're talking death threats after a UN speech, financial scandals that exposed her as a total hypocrite, and accusations that she's nothing more than a privileged rich kid playing dress-up as an activist. By the end of this video, you're gonna wonder if Emma Watson is even the person she claims to be, or if it's all just one massive performance that makes her acting in Harry Potter look amateur. Here's what's crazy. This woman made $85 million before she could legally drink in America, got leaked in the Panama Papers while preaching about equality, and then basically ghosted Hollywood when people started calling her out. So what really happened? Why did the golden girl of an entire generation turn into one of the most polarizing figures in entertainment? And more importantly, why won't she address the elephant in the room? Stick around because I'm about to expose everything they don't want you to know about Emma Charlotte Doer Watson. I promise you this, by the time we're done here, you're gonna see Emma Watson in a completely different light. This isn't some puff piece where we celebrate her achievements and call it a day. Nah, we're going deep into the controversies, the scandals, the moments where she showed her true colors, and the uncomfortable questions that nobody in mainstream media has the guts to ask. Let's get into it. So here's where it all started. April 15th, 1990, Paris, France. Yeah, you heard that right. Emma Watson isn't even British by birth. She was born in Paris to two lawyers, Jacqueline Loosby and Chris Watson. Now, before you start thinking she came from some rags to riches story, let me stop you right there. This girl grew up comfortable, like really comfortable. Her parents were both attorneys, which means money was never really an issue. But here's the thing that shaped her entire personality. When Emma was just 5 years old, her parents split up, divorce. And not just any divorce, but the kind where little Emma had to pack her bags and move from Paris to Oxfordshire, England with her mom. Now, I'm not saying the divorce was traumatic or anything, but think about it. You're 5 years old, you're leaving the only home you've ever known, your parents can't stand each other, and you're being shuttled back and forth like a piece of luggage. That kind of instability, it does something to a kid. It makes you crave control. It makes you want perfection. It makes you put on a mask so nobody sees the cracks underneath. And boy, did Emma Watson become a master at wearing masks. She ended up at the Dragon School in Oxford, which sounds fancy because it is fancy. This wasn't your average public school where kids are eating mystery meat in the cafeteria. This was the kind of place where future politicians and CEOs send their kids. And Emma, she was a straight A student from day one. Not just good at school, we're talking obsessive, competitive level good. Teachers loved her, classmates probably found her annoying, and she threw herself into theater like her life depended on it. She wasn't some natural-born performer who everyone knew would be a star. Nah, she was a theater kid who worked her butt off, did all the school plays, and dreamed of maybe, just maybe, making it as an actress someday.
But here's what nobody tells you. Emma Watson had zero Hollywood connections. Her parents weren't producers or directors or agents. They were lawyers in England. She didn't have some magical pathway to stardom. She was just another kid who liked to perform, attending a posh school, living a pretty normal upper-middle-class life. And then everything changed with one audition that would completely hijack the next decade of her life. Picture this. It's 1999, Emma's 9 years old, and casting directors are searching all over the UK for 3 kids to play Harry, Ron, and Hermione in this little film adaptation of a book series that's starting to blow up. The author, some lady named JK Rowling, is super involved in the casting process, and she wants these characters to be perfect. Thousands of kids audition, literally thousands. And little Emma Watson, who's never been in a professional production in her life, decides to give it a shot. 8 auditions. She went through 8 rounds of auditions. Can you imagine being 9 years old and having to prove yourself 8 different times for one role? The pressure, the competition, the constant rejection and callbacks. It's intense even for adults, but Emma nailed it. She had that bossy, know-it-all energy that Hermione needed. She wasn't trying to be cute or likable. She was
trying to be the smartest person in the room, and that's exactly what they wanted. So they gave her the part, signed her to a contract for 8 movies, and just like that, Emma Watson's childhood was over. Let me be real with you for a second. Getting cast in Harry Potter at age 9 sounds like a dream come true, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because what nobody talks about is the cost of that kind of fame when you're still a kid. Emma started filming the first Harry Potter movie when she was 10 years old. 10! Most kids that age are worried about homework and playground drama. Emma was working 12-hour days on a massive film set, learning lines, hitting marks, dealing with directors and producers and publicists. She wasn't going to regular school anymore. She had tutors on set. She wasn't hanging out with normal kids her age. Her friends were Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint, 2 boys who were going through the exact same bizarre experience. And here's where it gets dark. From the moment that first Harry Potter movie came out in 2001, Emma Watson became public property. 11 years old, and suddenly there are paparazzi following her to school, magazines writing about her hair and her clothes, grown men on the internet talking about how they can't wait until she turns 18. Yeah, you heard that right. There were actual countdown clocks on websites, counting down the days until Emma Watson would be legal. She was a child, and grown adults were sexualizing her in real time, and nobody did anything about it. The media just treated it like a funny quirk of celebrity culture, instead of the disgusting predatory behavior it actually was. But Emma kept going. She filmed Chamber of Secrets, then Prisoner of Azkaban, then Goblet of Fire. Each movie got bigger, each paycheck got fatter, and each year, Emma Watson lost a little more of herself. She wasn't Emma anymore. She was Hermione. Everywhere she went, everything she did, people saw Hermione Granger. And the worst part? She started to lose track of where Hermione ended and where Emma began. That's what happens when you spend your entire adolescence playing the same character. It becomes your identity, whether you like it or not.
The money was insane, though. By the time she was 15, Emma Watson was a millionaire several times over. Warner Brothers was paying her millions per movie, plus she had merchandising deals, appearance fees, the whole 9 yards. Her parents set up trusts and investments, made sure she wouldn't blow it all like other child stars. But money can't buy you a normal childhood. Money can't give you back the school dances you missed, the sleepovers you couldn't attend, the teenage rebellion phase you never got to have because you were too busy being a role model for millions of kids around the world. And the pressure to be perfect, it was crushing her. Emma was still trying to maintain straight A's in her studies while filming these massive blockbuster movies. She'd be on set all day, then study for exams at night. Her tutor said she was brilliant, but exhausted, running on fumes, having anxiety attacks about not being good enough. Because that's the thing about perfectionism. It's never enough. You can have $100 million and millions of fans, and you'll still feel like a failure if you get 1 B on a test. By the time Order of the Phoenix came around, Emma was 16 years old and seriously considering quitting. She didn't want to do it anymore. The fame was suffocating, the schedule was brutal, and she was stuck in a contract that felt like a prison sentence. She had no freedom, no privacy, no control over her own life. Every decision had to be approved by Warner Brothers. Every public appearance was choreographed. Every word she said was analyzed and picked apart. She was a teenager trapped in a billion-dollar franchise, and there was no way out. But she stuck with it. She filmed the last 3 movies, collected her paychecks, and tried to figure out who the heck she was supposed to be once Harry Potter ended. And that's where things get really interesting, because Emma Watson decided she wasn't just gonna fade into obscurity like most child stars. Nah, she was gonna reinvent herself as a serious actress, and more importantly, as an activist. And that's when the real controversy started piling up. So it's 2014. Emma's 24 years old, and she's been appointed as a UN Women Goodwill Ambassador. Pretty prestigious, right? She gets invited to give this big speech at the United Nations headquarters in New York about gender equality and feminism. And on September 20th, 2014, Emma Watson stands up in front of world leaders and gives what would become known as the HeForShe speech. She talks about how feminism isn't just a women's issue. It's a human rights issue. She invites men to join the conversation, to be allies, to fight for equality. Sounds great, doesn't it? The speech went viral. Millions of views, celebrities praising her, media calling her the new face of feminism. 24 years old, and Emma Watson had just positioned herself as a voice for an entire movement. But here's where it gets messy, because within hours of that speech, the internet turned on her. And I mean turned on her hard. There were threats to leak nude photos of her, which turned out to be a hoax, but still scared the crap out of her. 4chan users were threatening to expose private pictures. Websites were posting countdown timers to when the photos would supposedly drop. And Emma had to deal with the fact that trying to do something good for the world resulted in immediate vicious backlash.
But that was just the beginning of the criticism, because as soon as Emma Watson became the poster child for feminism, people started examining her version of feminism real close. And what they found? It was what critics started calling white feminism. Feminism that only focuses on the issues affecting wealthy, educated white women in Western countries, while completely ignoring the struggles of women of color, poor women, women in developing countries, and anyone who didn't fit into Emma's privileged bubble. Think about it. Here's a woman who made tens of millions of dollars as a child, who went to elite private schools, who had every opportunity handed to her on a silver platter, suddenly lecturing the world about equality and struggle. The optics were bad, really bad, and people started calling her out for it. They'd ask her about intersectional feminism, about how race and class affect women's experiences, and Emma would give these vague, surface-level answers that made it clear she hadn't really done the work to understand feminism beyond her own narrow experience. Then came the Vanity Fair photo shoot in 2017. Emma posed for the magazine in this sheer top situation where you could partially see her chest, and the internet absolutely lost its mind. Here's the thing. The photo was artistic. It was tasteful. It wasn't even that revealing compared to what other celebrities do. But because Emma had positioned herself as this feminist icon, people jumped on her for being a hypocrite. They said she was objectifying herself, that she was setting a bad example, that you can't be a feminist and show your body at the same time, which is ridiculous, because feminism is supposed to be about choice, about women having the freedom to do whatever they want with their own bodies. But Emma's response made things worse. Instead of just saying it's my body and I'll do what I want, she got all defensive and tried to justify it with this long explanation about feminism and choice and empowerment. And that's when people realized Emma Watson doesn't actually have a thick skin. She can dish out opinions about how the world should work, but the second someone criticizes her, she crumbles. She needs everyone to like her, needs everyone to think she's perfect, and that desperate need for approval, it makes her come across as fake. Now here's where things get really juicy. 2016, the Panama Papers leak happens. For those who don't know, the Panama Papers were this massive document leak that exposed how rich people and corporations hide their money in offshore accounts to avoid paying taxes. And guess whose name showed up in those papers? Emma frickin' Watson. Yeah, the same woman who was out here preaching about equality and fairness and making the world a better place had set up an offshore company in the British Virgin Islands. Now her PR team immediately went into damage control mode. They put out a statement saying it was for privacy and security reasons, not tax evasion. They said that as a young woman in the public eye, Emma needed to protect her identity when purchasing property. And look, I get it. Celebrities do need privacy, and there are legitimate reasons to use offshore companies for security. But come on, the timing was terrible. Here's Emma Watson, UN Goodwill Ambassador, feminist icon, talking about fairness and equality, and she's literally using the same tax avoidance strategies that billionaires and corporations use to keep more of their money instead of paying their fair share. The hypocrisy was off the charts. People were furious. They felt betrayed because at the end of the day, Emma Watson talks a big game about making the world better, but when it comes down to it, she's protecting her own wealth, just like every other rich person. And she never really addressed it head on. She put out that one statement through her lawyers and then basically hoped everyone would forget about it. about it. Which is wild, because if you're really about that activist life, if you really care about economic justice and equality, you should be willing to have that uncomfortable conversation about your own privilege and your own financial choices. But Emma didn't want to go there. She wanted to keep her money and keep her reputation, and she thought she could have both. This brings us to another controversy that people don't talk about enough. Emma's so-called activism is super selective. She'll post a black square for Black Lives Matter, she'll throw up some hashtags about climate change, she'll share articles about women's rights, but when it comes to actually doing the work, actually using her massive platform and her massive wealth to create real change, crickets. It's what people call performative activism, looking like you care without actually doing anything that costs you something. Let me break this down for you. Emma started this feminist book club called Our Shared Shelf, where she'd pick books for people to read and discuss. Sounds cool, right? Except when you look at the books she was choosing, they were all written by and for privileged, educated, mostly white women. Where were the books by black feminists, Latina feminists, indigenous feminists, women from the global south? They were barely represented. It was feminism through the lens of someone who's never had to worry about money, never had to worry about safety, never had to worry about basic survival. And that's not real feminism. That's just a rich girl's book club with a political slant. And then we have to talk about the JK Rowling situation, because this is where Emma Watson really showed her true colors. So JK Rowling, the woman who created Harry Potter and basically made Emma's entire career possible, started posting some really transphobic stuff on social media. We're talking full-on TERF rhetoric, trans-exclusionary radical feminist, basically saying that trans women aren't real women and shouldn't be allowed in women's spaces. It was ugly, it was hurtful, and it sparked this massive controversy. Now, you'd think Emma Watson, feminist icon, champion of equality, would immediately speak out against this, right? Wrong. Emma stayed silent for weeks while fans were begging her to say something. Daniel Radcliffe came out with a statement supporting trans rights, Rupert Grint made a statement, even minor cast members from Harry Potter were speaking up. But Emma? Radio silence. She eventually put out this weak statement on Twitter that didn't even mention JK Rowling by name, just some general both sides nonsense about trans rights being human rights, but also respecting different opinions.
And that's when a lot of people realized Emma Watson's activism is only strong when it doesn't cost her anything. Speaking up for feminism when it makes her look good, easy. Standing up to the woman who made her famous and potentially damaging that relationship, too scary. She'd rather protect her own interests than actually stand up for marginalized people when it really matters. And that's not activism, that's PR. Let's talk about her acting career post-Harry Potter, because this is another area where things didn't go the way Emma planned. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, wanted to shed the Hermione image and show her range. So she did The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which was actually pretty good. She held her own. Then she did The Bling Ring for Sofia Coppola, playing this vapid, celebrity-obsessed thief. Also decent. But then came Beauty and the Beast in 2017, and oh boy, the cracks started showing. First off, there were rumors coming out of that production that Emma was difficult to work with. Not like diva difficult, but more like she wanted to control every aspect of Belle's character, and it caused friction with the director and other actors. She insisted on changes to make Belle more feminist, more independent, more modern, which sounds good in theory, but Belle is supposed to be from 18th century France. You can't just completely rewrite a character to fit your political agenda and expect it to work. The movie made $1 billion because it's Disney, and people love Beauty and the Beast, not because Emma's performance was anything special. And then there's the singing. Oh man, the singing. Emma's voice had to be auto-tuned within an inch of its life. If you listen to the soundtrack without the movie's visuals, it's painfully obvious how much digital editing went into making her sound decent. And that had to sting, because Emma's supposed to be this multi-talented performer, but she couldn't even handle the vocal demands of a Disney princess role without massive technical assistance. Meanwhile, you've got actresses like Anna Kendrick and Haley Steinfeld who can actually sing, and it makes you wonder why Disney didn't cast someone with real vocal chops. After Beauty and the Beast, Emma's acting career basically stalled out. She did Little Women in 2019 with Greta Gerwig directing, and honestly, she was fine but forgettable. Saoirse Ronan and Florence Pugh completely outshined her in that movie. movie. And here's something interesting. There were rumors that Greta Gerwig didn't even want Emma for the role initially, that the studio pushed for her because of her name recognition. And if you watch the movie, you can kinda tell. Emma seems like she's in a different movie than everyone else. Less natural, more performed. Since then, nothing major. No big roles, no exciting projects, nothing that suggests Emma Watson is serious about being an actress anymore. And I think that's because she realized something. She's not actually that good. She got the Harry Potter role at 9 years old because she fit the character. And then she spent a decade playing the same person. She never really developed her craft, never really challenged herself as a performer. And now, in her 30s, when she should be getting interesting, complex roles, directors aren't calling because they know she can't deliver.
But let's pivot to her personal life for a minute, because this is where things get messy in a different way. Emma's dating history has been tabloid fodder for years, and while a lot of it is unfair scrutiny that male actors don't face, some of it is on her for how she's handled relationships publicly. She dated a rugby player named Matthew Janney for a while. Then there was this tech CEO named William Knight. Both relationships were super private, which is fine. She has a right to privacy. But then in 2019, Emma did this interview with British Vogue where she used the term self-partnered to describe being single, and the internet roasted her into oblivion. Like, Emma, you're single. It's okay to be single. You don't need to invent some cutesy term to make it sound more empowering. It came off as so try-hard, so desperate to sound enlightened and evolved that it became a meme overnight. People started joking that rich people have a completely different vocabulary for normal experiences just to make themselves sound special. You're not unemployed, you're self-employed. You're not single, you're self-partnered. It was peak Emma Watson, taking something simple and making it unnecessarily complicated because she can't just be normal about anything. Then there's the whole Tom Felton situation. You know, Draco Malfoy. For years, fans have been obsessed with the idea that Emma and Tom had a thing going on. There are all these photos of them hanging out, stories from the set about Emma having a crush on him when they were kids, and both of them have been super coy about it in interviews. They won't confirm or deny anything, just keep it vague and mysterious, which keeps fans speculating and keeps them both relevant in the pop culture conversation. And honestly, it feels calculated, like they both know that as long as people are wondering about their relationship status, people will care about them. Currently, Emma's engaged to Brandon Green, son of British fashion billionaire Philip Green. And oh man, the optics on this one. Emma Watson, champion of equality and fighting for the little guy, is marrying into one of the wealthiest families in the UK. A family that, by the way, has been involved in their own controversies around tax avoidance and workplace allegations. So once again, Emma's personal choices completely contradict the image she tries to project publicly. You can't marry into extreme wealth and still pretend you're just a regular person fighting for justice. It doesn't work that way. Here's what really gets me. Emma Watson basically retired from acting without officially retiring. She hasn't taken on any major roles in years. She's barely active on social media. She's living this quiet life away from the spotlight. Her representatives denied that she was retiring when rumors started circulating, but come on, if you haven't done anything significant in your field for 5 years, you've essentially retired. And I think the reason she stepped back is because she couldn't handle the criticism anymore.
Emma spent so many years trying to control her image, trying to be perfect, trying to make everyone think she was this enlightened, evolved, activist, actress, intellectual. And when people started poking holes in that image, when they started pointing out the hypocrisy and the privilege and the performative nature of her activism, she couldn't take it, so she retreated. She took her millions of dollars, her famous boyfriend, and her carefully curated life, and she dipped out of the public conversation. But here's the kicker. She still wants credit for being an activist. She's still on the board of Kering, this massive luxury fashion conglomerate supposedly working on sustainability initiatives. Kering owns brands like Gucci, Saint Laurent, Balenciaga. We're talking about
companies that sell $1,000 handbags to rich people while exploiting workers in developing countries. And Emma's on their sustainability committee, which is basically just greenwashing. It's a corporation paying a celebrity to make them look like they care about the environment while they continue to operate the exact same way they always have. The more you look at Emma Watson's post-Harry Potter life, the more you realize it's all been carefully constructed PR. The feminist speeches, the book club, the activism, it's all designed to make her seem deep and thoughtful and socially conscious, when really, she's just another rich celebrity protecting her brand and her bank account. And you know what? Gen Z sees right through it. The younger generation that's growing up now, they're not buying what Emma's selling. They think she's corny, out of touch, a millennial relic trying to stay relevant with outdated feminism that doesn't address any of the real issues young people care about. They're more interested in activists who actually put their money where their mouth is, who actually take risks, who actually challenge power structures instead of just posting about them on Instagram. If you're enjoying this deep dive and want to see more content exposing the truth about celebrities, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, and there's so much more to uncover. Alright, let's keep going. The thing about Emma Watson that drives me crazy is the wasted potential. She had everything going for her. Money, fame, a platform that most activists would kill for, and the ability to make real change if she actually committed to it. But instead, she chose the safe path. She chose to be a celebrity activist instead of a real activist. And there's a huge difference between those two things. A celebrity activist posts on social media, gives speeches at fancy events, and associates themselves with causes that make them look good. A real activist sacrifices, takes risks, challenges power even when it's uncomfortable, and puts their money and their career on the line for what they believe in. Emma Watson is firmly in the first category, and she's never going to move to the second because it would require her to give up the comfortable life she's built.
Let's talk about her education, because this is another area where the privilege is just dripping off of her. After Harry Potter ended, Emma enrolled at Brown University, an Ivy League school in Rhode Island. She took some time off, transferred to Oxford for a bit, then went back to Brown and graduated in 2014 with a degree in English literature. And look, good for her for getting a degree when she didn't have to. She already had more money than most people will make in 10 lifetimes. She could have just coasted on her Harry Potter money forever. But the way she talked about her college experience was so out of touch. She did interviews about how she wanted to be normal, wanted to be treated like a regular student. Emma, you showed up to campus with bodyguards and a massive trust fund. You're not normal. You're never gonna be normal. And acting like you're just another college kid trying to find yourself when you have $85 million in the bank is insulting to people who are actually struggling to pay tuition and working 3 jobs just to afford textbooks. And what did she do with that fancy degree? Nothing. She didn't pursue academia, didn't become a writer, didn't use that education in any meaningful way. It was just another item to add to her resume, another thing she could point to when people questioned her intelligence. Look, I went to Brown. I'm smart. I'm educated. I'm not just a pretty face. But intelligence isn't about where you went to school. It's about what you do with your knowledge and how you apply it to make the world better. And by that measure, Emma's degree is just an expensive piece of paper. Here's something else people don't talk about. Emma's relationship with her Harry Potter co-stars is apparently not great. You never see her hanging out with Daniel or Rupert anymore. They're all friendly in public. They say nice things about each other in interviews, but there's no real friendship there. And rumors suggest it's because Emma became so focused on her image and her brand that she couldn't just be a normal person around people who knew her before she became this self-important activist character. Daniel Radcliffe went off and did weird indie movies, theater, and just generally seemed to enjoy acting without needing to be famous. Rupert Grint bought an ice cream truck and has been chillin', doing smaller projects, being low-key. Both of them seem relatively well-adjusted considering they were child stars. But Emma needed to prove something, needed to show the world she was more than Hermione, that she was important and relevant and making a difference. And that desperation, that need for validation, it pushed people away. There's this pattern with Emma where she can't just exist. She always has to be performing, whether it's performing activism, performing intelligence, performing feminism. It's all a show. And the exhausting part is that I don't think she even realizes she's doing it anymore. She's been performing performing for so long, since she was 10 years old, that she doesn't know who she actually is underneath all the layers of PR and branding.
Let me hit you with another controversial take. Emma Watson's feminism is designed to make her look good, not to actually help women. Real feminism requires you to listen to women who have different experiences than you, to center the voices of the most marginalized, to acknowledge your privilege and use it to elevate others. Emma does none of that. Her feminism is all about Emma. It's about how Emma feels about being a woman, how Emma experiences the world, what Emma thinks feminism should look like. She's never really platformed women of color, working class women, trans women, disabled women, or any women whose experiences differ significantly from her own privileged background. Her book club picks are all written by women who look and sound like her. Her speeches are all about her perspective. Her activism is filtered through the lens of a white, wealthy, cisgendered, able-bodied woman who's never had to worry about basic survival. And that's not feminism. That's narcissism with a political aesthetic. And don't even get me started on the sustainability stuff. Emma loves to talk about sustainable fashion, ethical consumption, all that good stuff. She shows up to events in outfits made from recycled materials. She posts about her eco-friendly lifestyle. She lectures people about their carbon footprint. But this woman flies on private jets, lives in massive houses, and consumes resources at a rate that's probably 100 times higher than the average person. But sure, tell us regular folks about how we need to bring reusable bags to the grocery store while you're jetting off to your third vacation home of the year. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Emma will post about climate change and then fly first class to some climate conference. She'll talk about wealth inequality while sitting on millions of dollars she has no intention of redistributing. She'll advocate for workers' rights while wearing clothes made by underpaid laborers in developing countries. And when people point out these contradictions, she either ignores them or gives some nonsense explanation about how she's doing her best and nobody's perfect. Here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Emma Watson is basically what happens when you give a child actor too much money and too much praise too young, and they grow up thinking they're way more important than they actually are. She's not special. She's not particularly talented. She's not some genius-level intellect. She got lucky. She auditioned for a role at 9 years old and happened to book the biggest franchise of her generation. That's it. That's the whole story. Everything after that is just her trying to convince herself and everyone else that she deserves the fame and fortune she stumbled into as a kid. And I think deep down, Emma knows this. I think she knows she's not that talented as an actress, that her activism is surface level at best, that her whole carefully constructed image is built on a foundation of privilege and luck rather than actual merit. And that knowledge, that insecurity, is what drives all of her behavior. The perfectionism, the need for control, the desperate attempt to be seen as serious and important, it all stems from the fear that people will figure out she's just average.
The retirement rumors started circulating in 2021. Her agent denied them, said Emma was just being selective about her projects. But come on, when an actress in her early 30s who used to be one of the biggest stars in the world suddenly can't land any major roles for years, that's not being selective, that's being rejected. Directors don't want to work with her because she's difficult and she doesn't bring in audiences anymore. Producers don't want to cast her because her acting is mediocre and she comes with too much baggage. Studios don't want to deal with her because she's more trouble than she's worth. So Emma did what any smart, rich person would do. She rebranded her exit as a choice. I'm not being rejected. I'm choosing to step back. I'm not washed up. I'm just pursuing other interests. I'm not irrelevant. I'm just private now. It's all spin, all PR, all carefully managed messaging to protect her ego and her brand. And you know what? Good for her, honestly. She made her money. She got out before she could become a complete joke, and now she gets to live her life in peace. But
But let's not pretend she's still out here fighting the good fight or making a difference. She's not. She's a rich lady who did some acting when she was young and now coasts on her Harry Potter money while occasionally posting something vaguely political on social media to maintain the illusion that she cares. The Emma Watson story is ultimately a story about privilege and how it insulates you from consequences. Most child actors crash and burn. They struggle with substance issues, they go broke, they can't handle the transition from child star to adult actor, and they end up as cautionary tales. But Emma was smart enough, or had people around her who were smart enough to protect her money and manage her image. So even when her acting career fizzled out, even when her activism was exposed as performative nonsense, even when scandal after scandal revealed her to be a hypocrite, she was fine. Because when you have $85 million, you're always going to be fine. That's the uncomfortable reality of celebrity culture. Emma Watson can be mediocre at everything she does, can be called out for hypocrisy repeatedly, can essentially quit her career in her early 30s, and it doesn't matter. She's still rich, still famous, still has opportunities that regular people could never dream of. And she got all of that not because she's exceptionally talented or hard-working or deserving, but because she happened to be the right age and look when Harry Potter was being cast. And before you come at me saying I'm just a hater or I'm jealous or whatever, I'm not. I actually think Emma could have done something really meaningful with the platform and resources she was given, but she chose comfort over courage, image over authenticity, and self-preservation over actually standing for something. And that's disappointing because we've got enough celebrities doing performative activism. We've got enough rich people pretending to care about issues while protecting their own wealth and privilege. We needed Emma Watson to be different, to actually use her power for good instead of just for PR, and she failed.
The current state of Emma Watson in 2026 is basically this. She's engaged to a billionaire's son. She occasionally shows up on some corporate board to collect a paycheck while pretending to work on sustainability. She hasn't acted in anything significant in years, and she's largely disappeared from public life. She's not making movies, she's not giving speeches, she's not leading any movements or fighting for any causes. She's just existing in her bubble of wealth and privilege, which is exactly what she was always gonna do once the cameras stopped pointing at her. And the legacy she's leaving behind, it's complicated. On one hand, she was Hermione Granger in one of the most successful film franchises of all time, and that's gonna be on her tombstone no matter what else she does. That character meant something to millions of people, inspired kids to read, showed that being smart and hard-working could make you the hero of the story. But on the other hand, Emma Watson the person, Emma Watson the activist, Emma Watson the adult actress, that legacy is far less impressive. She'll be remembered as someone who talked a big game about feminism and social justice, but never actually put her money or her career on the line for those causes. She'll be remembered as someone who got called out for hypocrisy repeatedly, and instead of learning and growing, she just retreated and hid. She'll be remembered as a child star who failed to transition into adult stardom and couldn't handle the criticism that came with trying. But here's the thing that really gets me. Emma Watson had every advantage. She had money, she had fame, she had a platform, she had education, she had opportunities, and she did the bare minimum with all of it. She could have funded organizations fighting for women's rights, but instead she just gave speeches. She could have used her wealth to support marginalized communities, but instead she hid money offshore. She could have taken risks as an actress and worked with interesting directors on challenging projects, but instead she played it safe and then quit when it didn't work out. She could have been honest about her privilege and her limitations, but instead she performed wokeness while living a completely contradictory lifestyle. At the end of the day, Emma Watson is just another celebrity who convinced people she was special when really she's pretty ordinary. She's not a villain, but she's definitely not the hero she pretends to be. She's just a person who got famous famous as a kid, made a bunch of money, tried to stay relevant as an adult by jumping on social causes, and then quietly faded into obscurity when people started seeing through the act. The most frustrating part is that she probably doesn't even see it that way. In her mind, she probably thinks she made a positive impact, that she helped advance feminism and women's rights, that she used her platform responsibly, and maybe in some small ways she did. The HeForShe campaign got people talking about gender equality, even if the conversation was superficial. Her book club got some people reading, even if the selections were limited and privileged. Her UN speeches brought attention to women's issues, even if they didn't actually result in meaningful policy changes.
But positive impact requires more than just raising awareness. It requires action, sacrifice, commitment, and authenticity. And Emma Watson brought none of those things to the table. She brought PR strategies and carefully crafted statements and photo ops and social media posts. She brought performance, not substance. And at a time when we desperately need people with platforms and resources to actually fight for change, Emma Watson's brand of celebrity activism is worse than useless. It's actively harmful because it makes people think something is being done when really nothing is changing. So where does this leave us? Emma Watson is 36 years old now in 2026, and her best years are behind her. She's not going to have a comeback as an actress because she's burned too many bridges and frankly wasn't good enough to begin with. She's not going to be a respected activist because people have seen through the performative nature of her advocacy. She's not going to be known for anything other than playing Hermione Granger in some movies that came out when she was a kid. And maybe that's okay. Maybe not everyone who gets famous needs to do something incredible with that fame. Maybe it's enough to just make your money, live your life, and fade away. But Emma Watson positioned herself as someone who wanted to be more than that. Someone who wanted to make a difference. Someone who had important things to say about how the world should work. And when you set that bar for yourself and then fail to clear it, people are going to call you out. The double standard is real, though. Male actors get away with so much worse and nobody cares. Male activists can be total hypocrites and people still take them seriously. Male celebrities can be mediocre at everything and still get opportunities handed to them. So part of the criticism Emma faces is definitely rooted in sexism and the impossibly high standards we hold women to, especially women who dare to have opinions about feminism and social justice. But that doesn't let Emma off the hook for her own failures and contradictions. You can acknowledge that she faces unfair scrutiny because she's a woman, while also acknowledging that she's been a hypocrite who's more interested in protecting her image and her wealth than actually fighting for the causes she claims to care about. Both things can be true at the same time. The real question is, what could Emma Watson have done differently? If she actually wanted to be the person she claims to be, what would that have looked like? Well, for starters, she could have been honest about her privilege instead of trying to pretend she's just like everyone else. She could have said, look, I got incredibly lucky as a kid. I made more money than I'll ever need, and I want to use that privilege to help people who weren't as fortunate as me. That would have been authentic and relatable. She could have actually redistributed her wealth instead of hoarding it and hiding it in offshore accounts, set up foundations, fund grassroots organizations, put real money behind the causes she claims to support. But that would have required her to give something up, and Emma Watson has never shown any willingness to sacrifice her own comfort for the greater good. She could have used her platform to elevate voices that aren't usually heard instead of just amplifying her own voice. Bring women of color, queer women, disabled women, working class women into the conversation. Let them speak for themselves instead of speaking for them. But that would have required Emma to step back and share the spotlight, and she wasn't willing to do that either. She could have taken real risks as an actress, worked with challenging directors, played complex or unlikable characters, done projects that might fail but would have shown actual range and commitment to the craft. But instead, she played it safe with franchise blockbusters and prestige projects, where she was the weak link surrounded by better actors. And most importantly, she could have been honest when she screwed up. When she got called out for the Panama Papers, she could have said, "You know what? You're right. That was hypocritical, and here's what I'm gonna do differently." When people criticized her white feminism, she could have said, "I have a lot to learn, and I'm listening." When her acting career stalled, she could have admitted it wasn't working out instead of pretending she was choosing to step back. But Emma Watson has never been able to admit fault or show genuine vulnerability, and that's what makes her so frustrating. The tragedy of Emma Watson is that she had the potential to be a genuinely positive force in the world, and she wasted it. Not because she's a bad person, I don't think she is, but because she's weak. She's weak in the face of criticism, weak in her commitment to her supposed values, weak in her willingness to sacrifice anything meaningful for what she believes in, and weakness dressed up as activism is just performance art.
So here we are in 2026, and Emma Watson is largely irrelevant. Gen Z doesn't care about her, millennials are starting to realize she was all talk, and the generation that grew up with Harry Potter is aging out of the demographic that determines pop culture trends. She'll always have the Hermione legacy, but beyond that, she's just another former child star who couldn't figure out who they were supposed to be as an adult. The question I'll leave you with is this: was Emma Watson ever authentic about anything, or has she been performing her entire life? From the moment she became Hermione Granger at age 10 to her current iteration as a reclusive former actress married to wealth and privilege, has there ever been a real Emma Watson, or is it all just layers of carefully constructed image? I honestly don't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure Emma does either. Maybe that's the saddest part of this whole story. A little girl got thrust into the spotlight before she had a chance to figure out who she was, spent her formative years being told she had to be perfect, made a fortune playing a character that overshadowed her real identity, and then spent her adult life desperately trying to prove she was more than that, while simultaneously being terrified of actually being seen for who she really is. That's a tragedy, even if it's a tragedy wrapped in wealth and privilege. But at the end of the day, Emma Watson made her choices. She chose image over authenticity, comfort over courage, and performance over substance. And those choices have consequences. The consequence is irrelevance, is a legacy that's complicated at best and hypocritical at worst, is a life that looks perfect on the surface but is probably pretty empty underneath. And that's the real story of Emma Watson, not the fairy tale version she tried to sell us about a magical girl who grew up to fight for justice and equality, but the reality of a child star who got lucky, made some money, tried to stay relevant as an adult by jumping on trendy causes, and then faded away when people stopped buying what she was selling. It's not as inspiring as the version she wanted us to believe, but it's a hell of a lot more honest. So what do you think? Is Emma Watson a hypocrite who deserves all the criticism she gets, or is she a victim of impossible expectations and sexist double standards? Did she waste her potential and her platform, or did she do the best she could with the bizarre hand she was dealt as a child star? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't hold back. This is a conversation worth having, because Emma Watson's story is really a story about celebrity, privilege, activism, and the gap between the image we project and the reality of who we actually are. And that's something all of us can learn from, whether we're famous or not.